one of the things that I think is useful, instead of starting from a blank piece of paper, is actually to hear about what's happened when partnerships have worked in other places. And I'm going to introduce Professor Peter O'Connor, who is, I would say, about 3 years ahead of where we are in establishing work in partnership in Auckland, New Zealand. And his work, I think, has been over many years, considering how the arts might work in partnership to improve the lives of our young people, of our older people, of people who work in mental health settings, people post-crisis. So I might, how are you, Peter?
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
Lovely to connect again.
So, Peter, do you want to let us know a little of the history behind the development of your centre and the kinds of partnerships that you have had over, say, the last decade, which has made it possible, I suppose, to do what you're doing now?
Sure. We, ngā mihi nui a koutou ngā rangatira e ngā hohoki. Lovely to be connected across the Tasman, but we keep talking about this cross-Tasman bubble. I really hope it happens so that we can connect in person. These things are important, aren't they, in the arts, to be in the same room as much as possible. The centre that I direct at the University of Auckland, the Centre for Arts and Social Transformation, came about really because of a number of key and strategic partnerships that we established at the university. Perhaps one of the most important is the funding partnerships that we've been able to establish. Over my career, which is unusual in the arts and education, I've had funding in excess, I worked out the other day, of 9 million New Zealand dollars. 4 million of that in the last 4 years, 3 million of it untagged. And what I mean by untagged, and I think this is really important, is that it was money that was given for the establishment of the centre in a partnership of trust from the philanthropics who gave us that money, that we had a shared agenda, we had a shared sense of priority, what we wanted to achieve. And as the academic, the director of the centre, given the freedom to use that money as I saw fit. So what that meant, for example, was that I was able, after earthquakes in Mexico City, take a team of artists, academics, workers to work in Mexico City in the most quake-affected parts using the arts. I was able to use that money last year to work on Skid Row with homeless people at the Museum of Contemporary Art, another partnership that we established in Los Angeles. At the beginning of this year, during and immediately after the bushfires in Australia, we were able to have a team of people here at our centre work in partnership with the University of Melbourne, University of Sydney, Central Queensland University, and other players to produce resources to support teachers when they return to school using the arts, and most recently use some of that money to establish, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, a resource to assist teachers return to school during COVID-19. And all of that possible really because of the generous nature and the generous proportion of the funds which have been given, but also the kind of partnership that I have had, in particular with the Chartwell Trust, who've been very generous in what they've given. We've also established partnerships in terms of the Creative Alliance New Zealand, Creative Arts Health Wellbeing Alliance, which has over 500 artists and people who work in health interested in the connection between arts and wellbeing. So our centre produces regular newsletters, hosts events, contracts out research projects, does a significant amount of research around that, and we have partnerships with government, we have partnerships with Creative New Zealand, which is the equivalent of your Arts Council in Australia, Artists in Corrections, which represents over 200 artists who are working in prisons and secure environments around the country. Arts Access Aotearoa, which represents the needs of people with disability in the arts sector, and we have a very strong partnership with them. We fund awards for them. We do a range of different projects with them throughout the year. Those partnerships all came together really for us when we pulled together a resource to support teachers returning to schools. Our schools reopened for everybody back in May after the most severe lockdown in the world, really, certainly one of the strictest. And so we, as a centre, established a partnership with the New Zealand Principals Federation. So that's the organisation that represents every principal in New Zealand who've become very powerful advocates for the arts and are working alongside us in all sorts of ways now. The New Zealand Primary Teachers Union represents every primary teacher in the country. The New Zealand National Commission for UNESCO. And what we did was work with our partners at University of Melbourne, Griffith University, artists who work with us biculturally, those who are working in Māori, Indigenous art forms, to create a resource to go up online to support teachers when they go back into schools. And because of the strength of those partnerships, within a month, we had over 280,000 downloads of that resource in 117 countries. Over 40,000 teachers in New Zealand use the resource on a regular basis. I've now employed 2 research assistants who are starting to track what we managed to do. And again, all of that based on the nature of the partnerships that we've developed with other key players. I received an email just last week from the New Zealand Principals Federation saying, so how do we as principals get alongside you now to make sure that what we did with Te Rito Toi, which was to get arts into every school in New Zealand when they went back after COVID, to be long term? And I certainly can't do that as an academic in a university, but I can certainly begin to push and press in different ways through a relationship with the Principals Federation. And really important for us too, in terms of the teachers union. Over 90% of all teachers in New Zealand are unionised, part of that union. So when you bring those 2 key players together with the University of Auckland, as the #1 research-led university in the country, your capacity to do things is significant. With partners right across the university, so the centre has 27 associate members. That includes members in the Brain Research Unit who are doing work alongside us on the place of music in dementia wards, and we're working alongside them in that. And this partnership, the partnership that we have with Create, is really important for us as we develop work. We've developed work, for example, with Michael and others for the Creative Schools Initiative, which has worked in 56 schools, both here and in Australia, with 16,000 children, to have a look at how creative schools are and looking at how we might grow that.
So Peter,
finally, yep,
sorry,
and
Peter.
that's probably it. Yep, no, I was just going to say, and finally, what's been really important for us as an academic unit are our partnerships with artists, and we've tried to establish. We're about to move into a building. We've been gifted a building by the university for the centre, that space will be a space where we also make art and have artists and do that particular work as well. So we've very strong connections with arts makers up and down the country. So
sorry, Peter, that's a massive kind of slate of things to do. When you look back, so when you bump into someone at a dinner party, which of course you haven't for 6 months, but if you imagine one day we will have them again, and people say, what do you want this this thing that's doing so many programs to do? What do you actually want it to do? What's your answer to them?
So the centre's vision, the centre's goal is that the arts are recognised and validated as a means for us to better understand the world, so we might imagine the world differently. That the arts are a democratic right, and that everybody deserves access to the power of the arts. And so our research, our advocacy work, our partnership work is entirely driven by that. And that what's been really important, I think, for our success is that we haven't been project funded and project based. We've had partnerships where people have said, here's some money to do what you think as a university you need to do. And that's a reasonably common thing in just about every other part of the university except the arts and education.
So we're coming to the end of the time we've got to chat, and I'm sure people can follow up with you if they'd like to find out more about your centre, and certainly go to your website. But in 10 years' time, when you look back to the legacy of this work, what do you hope that legacy will be?
Oh, legacies. The centre will still be here, and it will still be doing the work. You know, that's part of the trick, isn't it? Centres come and go if they rely on an individual. So, you know, we have 8 staff now in the centre. So they carry the vision, they carry the purpose. The centre itself will be very different in 4 or 5 years' time when I decide to move out to the beach full time. So in terms of the centre, the vision for the centre is that it survives and continues the work, because this is never ending. In terms of the way in which we, as a nation, as a world, value and see the purpose of the arts beyond themselves. So that's really important when you think about Create, you know, at your beginning, how do you build in structures to sustain beyond the individual?
Right. Well, thanks, Peter. I mean, Peter's going to stay with us today as a partner of Create. And I think that experience from Auckland has been very instructive, I think, in our preparations for Create and our development of Create and our design of Create. So thanks so much, Peter, for that.
No worries, mate. Always good to chat.
Always great to chat, Peter.